Just housekeeping, we tried to do a fishbowl model, but we realized our cameras wouldn't pick up on everything. So originally it was going to be our panel speakers in the middle, and then the fishbowl model was the board members in the second round, and then the third would be our friends and observers from CalPAC conference. But you can sit wherever you want, because you can sit wherever you want. And other housekeeping, we just want to thank Reverend Royce Porter, Pastor Royce back there, for hosting us. This is his church, Crenshaw. And then all of our team back there, Troy and Anna and Aaron, we want to thank you. And then my guy RJ in the back doing AV Tech. And from Faith Chad Whitmore, he is helping us, and he's going to record so that if you want to use this at any other time, you can have this resource. But I guess we're going to officially start. I'm going to test this. Levy, does this work? You don't even have it on, Levy. Oh, he's good for now. As long as you can hear this, does anybody else need this? Or is the microphone loud enough? Hey, panelists, we don't need this until Levy tells us we need this. We do not need it for the recording. We might need to pick up another microphone if we need to do translation. So there's that. But it's so nice to see you all. If you are in the fishbowl on the outer rims and you want to see the panelists better, you're welcome to. Look, there's 4 seats in the middle, and you get to stare at them. No, the board's like, no, and the staff is like, no. Well, let's get started. Good evening, everyone. I'll sit down in a little bit, but I just wanted to thank you for coming today. I'm Allison Mark. I'm the senior pastor at Faith United Methodist Church in Torrance. Today I wear a different hat. It's friends to this panel, but also the president and the chair of the General Board of Church and Society, who is here today. So all the board members, can you just raise your hand or wave? So General Board of Church and Society. We have our General Board of Church and Society staff as well. Can you wave, staff? All right. And we want to thank all of our distinguished guests in our CalPAC conference, too, for coming. Those are part of our Justice and Compassion Ministries. We're grateful for you to be here today. I see our district superintendent, the Reverend Dr. Saya Tutahi. So we say that hi to Saya over there. And so tonight, we're so grateful. We're blessed that you have come to gather under the banner of sacred resilience and disciplined hope. It's a theme that speaks to both the devastation and the determination that we have witnessed in the wake of Southern California wildfires. We thank the General Board of Church and Society and the CalPAC Annual Conference Justice and Compassion Ministries for this collaboration. As we welcome the members of our GBCS board for their biannual meeting held in the Western Jurisdiction. Woohoo! Who's in the Western Jurisdiction? That's us! The CalPAC West District, and also here at Crenshaw as one of our sites, and Faith United Methodist Church, as the board meeting will be held there. I would like to give my deepest gratitude again to my brother, Pastor Royce Porter, for hosting us, and his team. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as we gather, I wanted you all to know that we were trying to figure out what to do, and should this be a donor gala? Should this be a fundraiser? And when the fires hit California in January, it was not hard to do a quick pivot and to change direction of what this night was meant to be for. But our board members already had plane tickets or getting ready to book them, and so we wanted to gather you before our board meeting starts. But as we have a call to move from ashes to action, to reckon with the iniquities that disaster expose, and to commit ourselves to rebuilding with justice, this was a fishbowl format that we have, and so it's allowing us to listen to the stories and then have time for Q&A. And we're asking if the Q&A comes first from the board members, and then at the outer rim is the observers, and that's how you normally do a fishbowl. But tonight I think we can entertain wherever the Spirit leads us. But before I introduce our panelists for this evening's listening session, I would like to invite our General Secretary of the General Board of Church and Society, Bishop Julius C. Trimble, to share a greeting and welcome for those of us gathered here tonight.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you for hosting us here in LA for our board meeting. The General Board of Church and Society, according to the United Methodist Church, your social principles, we affirm the dignity of all people, including migrants, immigrants, refugees, and persons who've been targeted in this current environment for justice. I was just reading all of the work that our staff does just in terms of legislative priorities, which would include economic, health, gender, food security, climate change, voting rights, peace and harmony, and from the Philippines to the Korean Peninsula, and a commitment to advocate for peace, even though there are so many countries that are investing in the war machines of their countries. We're going to spend more time in the next few days listening as well as doing the work of the General Board of Church and Society, and quoting Attorney Mona Lisa from last night, it's body to body, being close in proximity to people that we're in ministry with. So thanks be to God for our time here tonight, and I turn it back to you guys.
Amen.
Little Catherine, if you want to sit up here with Mommy and Daddy, I have a chair for you. Do you want to sit here? She's like, nah. It's okay. If you want to sit, we'll make a chair for you. Well, friends, as we gather, the flames may have died down, but the after effects remain. And families are still displaced. Communities are still struggling to recover. And the disparities in disaster response and recovery continue to be felt. So we know that wildfires, like many other crises, do not impact all communities equally. Wealthier neighborhoods often receive aid and attention more quickly, while working class and historically marginalized communities are left waiting. Some voices are heard, others struggle to be acknowledged. And this is why we gather here tonight, because we need to hear the voices that are not often acknowledged. We're here to listen, we're here to learn, and we're here to act, especially as the General Board in the ways of making systemic change and policy changes. So reckoning with iniquity means that we must acknowledge these disparities. Rebuilding with justice means we must commit ourselves to changing the systems that perpetuate them. Tonight, we are honored to welcome a panel of United Methodists and community members who have lived through these fires. They bring with them their personal stories, their professional insights, and their calls to action. Their words to us are a gift tonight. May we receive them with open hearts and with a commitment not just to empathy, but to real transformative action. So before we begin our conversation, I'm going to introduce each of our panelists that are here. And they're almost sitting in the way that we had them in order, so let's do this. Tyann is this friend over here. And she is a friend and a former General Board of Higher Education Ministries Young Clergy Initiative intern. She was my intern in a joint Claremont School of Theology and CalPAC collaborative many years ago now. Tyann Konecki Forbes is a licensed clinical social worker, and this is her husband, Cameron. Cameron Forbes is a category strategy manager. Tyann grew up in the Pasadena-Altadena area, and then Cameron and Tyann settled as renters in Altadena. They have been invited to tell their story, their family story, along with Tyann's dad. And this is Matt. Want to say hi, Matt? Matt Konecki is a manager and an estimator of an auto body shop who was born and raised in Altadena, right? And he lost his family home in the fires. The Konecki Forbes family have been interviewed by CNN and the podcast Thin Ice with Amy Freeze, and are here to share with you their experiences in the aftermath of the fires. So we want to welcome Tyann and Cameron and Matt, and then I'll keep introducing, but let's welcome them. Next to Matt is my friend Rachel. And Rachel is a mental health care worker and We know that because of the fires, there were so many issues: indigenous land rights and sacred sites, iniquity and disaster relief and aid distribution, housing, displacement and gentrification, climate justice and accountability, environmental racism, insurance and rebuilding barriers, public health disparities, worker exploitation and safety, and access to mental health and trauma care. So mental health care is one of the many issues that those who have experienced the fires have experienced. And as a member of Westwood United Methodist Church, Rachel Gibson, a licensed clinical social worker and therapist, offered her services as a trained Red Cross trauma support person to many of the employees at NASA JPL, which is located in La Cañada Hills, where many employees lost their homes in the fire because they lived in the Pasadena-Altadena areas. And so we thank you, Rachel, for being here today. And then next to her are some old friends of mine, Reverend Jerry Andre Wilson, and Heather Wilson. They are a Methodist power couple. I met Heather as she was our United Methodist Volunteers and Mission Coordinator for the CalPAC Annual Conference. She was getting me ready for Haiti that year. It's a long time ago. And Pastor Andre and I have been colleagues in ministry, and he has served many United Methodist churches in the area, but most recently Altadena United Methodist Church, one of our Methodist churches that burned in the fires. My own personal connections with his congregation and community is that I used to live in Pastor Andre's neighborhood in Altadena. And while serving at First Pasadena, our churches did many joint events together, including confirmation classes and Holy Week. And that was when Reverend Yvonne Boyd was present at Altadena. The Wilsons join us today with a joined heart of faith and hope as they rebuild from the ashes. They have been asked to join us as a beacon of their community to share with us how they are rebuilding. I'm going to save Eric's introduction when he comes because he's going to think I'm crazy. So I wanted to introduce you, friends, to our panelists that are here today, but I want to start with the Kinnicky Forbes family, if that is okay. And so, as you notice that we are gathering in this format, so if you have any questions, write them down. If you are thinking of something, and we'll have a question and answer following. And as we listen tonight, I invite us to approach this conversation with humility and openness. And may we not only hear the stories of loss, but also the stories of resilience. So let us start. And I'm going to ask just the family in general, if you will share your experience of what happened during the fire or post-fire. All three of you lived in Altadena with your families, and there's beautiful Catherine over there, who I got to hold as a little baby. Now she's a big girl. So we'll just hand the microphones over to you two, you three.
Well, I'll go first. So, living in Altadena, the home that I owned was in my family for 67 years. Multiple generations grew up there. When my parents passed away, I took over the home. And living in Altadena for that long, we've seen the mountains burn many times. The winds were extraordinarily strong those days. And, a few things stand out in my memory. Me and my neighbors were all standing in the street, kind of watching the fires in the mountains and feeling the wind. And, I told them, I said, I've seen this before, just maybe pack a bag if we need to go, but, I've seen it many, many times. And a couple people said, no, we're leaving now, can't be too careful, those kind of things. I said, okay, well, I'm gonna just go to sleep and see what happens. 4:30 in the morning, my son knocked on my door and said, Dad, we have to leave. And I asked him, I said, well, is the house on fire? And he said, no. But as he opened the door, my house was filled with smoke. And fairly thick, you could still see across the rooms, but it was pretty full. And I said, okay, then let's go. He took his family and left. I grabbed a few things, a small backpack I had with some clothes in it, and a couple of small personal things, the dogs, and went out to get into the car. And as I opened my front door, I describe it as the opposite of the scene in The Wizard of Oz. When the house lands on the witch and she opens the door and it's beautiful Munchkin land, it was the opposite of that. You open the door and it was thick black smoke, flying embers everywhere, the wind still howling. And I thought, yeah, it's time to go. Put my dogs in the car, and then I walked to 4 or 5 neighbors' houses to make sure that they were not home. There were no cars in the driveways, knocked on a couple doors, that there were still cars there, no answers. Everybody was gone, and that was the most eerie thing, is I was the last one on my block to leave. And as I walked to my car, I turned around and you could see the houses maybe a block or two away already burning. So I took my pets in my car and left to my fiance's home in Baldwin Park with the thought of, I'm gonna go back up there as soon as it's daylight and get a few more things because the fire's not gonna come down. So at dawn, I snuck through a couple of roadblocks, got back up to the house. My individual house was not burning, but the houses on either side were engulfed. Neighbor across the street was engulfed. There were firemen there. There was no water pressure coming out of the fire hydrant that was in front of my house, that my father strategically bought that house because of that. And the look on their faces was just, they were beat. There's nothing they could do. And the winds were blowing so hard. There were branches of burning trees blowing by, embers. It was just, it was amazing. And you could see on some of the houses, on the neighbors' houses, the fireproof shingles were actually smoking. So when it comes to that, there's nothing that's going to save anything. Just luck and the grace of God is going to save your house. So after seeing the firefighters with the defeated look on their faces, I thought to myself, you know what, I'm not going in the house. Drove thought I would go around the block, made it a couple of houses down, and there were so many houses on fire that you couldn't see to the end of the hood of your car. So I backed up, turned around, went back the way I came, and went home and just watched the news. In a few hours, called my insurance company and filed a claim, thinking that this is the page, the proverbial turning of the page. My house is going to be gone. Let's start to fix it. There's mourning involved and there's praying involved and these things, but when it comes down to it, there's no going backwards, there's only moving forwards. I'm sorry. So, with that in my mind, I'm moving forward.
Yeah.
My daughter knows because I get frustrated with my neighbors because they haven't filed the paperwork to clean their houses, to clean their properties yet, and I'm ready to build. I have an architect. I'm going. Let's move along here. Yeah. I want to be the first to rebuild in Altadena. If you're not first, you're last. So let's go. But with all those things in mind, a lot of faith has has helped me work these things out. You know, there's still emotion. There's still emotion with everybody. But I think that, you know, I was frustrated with one of my neighbors, and I probably said something I shouldn't have said. He said, well, my wife is still so depressed over the whole thing. I don't know if we're ever going to come back. We don't know what we're going to do. I said, well, is she more depressed waking up in her hotel room or waking up in her brand new house? Let's move forward with this. You know, let's rebuild what we have, if we can. You know, there's so many people in that area, growing up in that area, and being up there, you know, for generations. You meet the very diverse population that's Altadena.
Yeah, exactly.
I coach youth football, youth baseball, coached my son basketball for many years up there, a lot of recreational leagues, travel leagues, all these things. And my daughter always tells me I should run for the mayor. And my fiance is always embarrassed because every single place we go, somebody says, "Hey, Matt, what's happening?" So knowing this and knowing the area, there's a lot of people up there that don't know what to do, and a lot of people up there that need not just help with possessions, but monetary help. And a lot of people up there were underinsured, or there were stories of insurance companies canceling their insurance. Or there was also a lot of multi-generational homes there where grandchildren are still living in their grandparents' home, and they don't know about fire insurance. They still have, hopefully their great-grandparents had it, and they still have it, and they don't even know. So there's a lot of these kind of things that the people in that community need. Not just myself. I have insurance. I'm a little underinsured, but that's okay. We can work things out. But the people that either were elderly with their mortgages paid off, that were living month to month, that thought, my mortgage is paid off. I've lived here for 60 years. My house has never burned. I'm canceling my insurance to save myself some money because they're on a fixed income. Those are the people that need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Tyann and Cameron are renters in Altadena, and you had unique challenges that you faced compared to homeowners in this recovery process. Do you mind sharing with us the experience that you two had?
Yeah. We left the night before. We had a tree fall in our driveway. We lived at the end of a long driveway. And the tree fell during the day. And I was like, I see flames on the mountain, and if that tree kept right behind us is sticks. We lived behind an empty lot that was kind of abandoned, and I was like, we're trapped if something happens. So we left the night before, and we had the same experience of trying to go back up and get things, because we just left in our pajamas thinking we would come back up the next day. And the day after that, we were going on a Disney cruise. So we wanted to go back and get our, matching t-shirts and Catherine's princess dresses. And we couldn't. It was really traumatic to see the flames flying overhead and the cemetery on fire. And I watched on Find My Friend, my dad's car going up. I was having a nervous breakdown the whole time, literally screaming. It was not a good time. But we were renters. Our home didn't burn, but everything around our home did. So we came home. We did go on the Disney cruise, by the way. It was really fun. Well, it wasn't that fun. It was fun for the kids. I don't even really remember it, but we came home from the cruise, and the neighborhood was still blocked. When the neighborhood opened up, we were allowed to go back to our home, and we thought, oh, well, our house didn't burn, we're fine. And we quickly realized, no, you're not, because everything we own, even dishes that were in the dishwasher closed, were completely covered in ash and soot. We had to throw away basically everything we own, except like pictures and memories and things. But it's not natural material that burned. A lot of the material has asbestos and lead, and so it's not safe to live in the home until it's been cleaned. Luckily, for the first time ever in my life, I feel like so responsible. I had renter's insurance, and so, but renter's insurance is like, we're gonna clean your mattress, and so, luckily, you know, me and my husband are both kind of, you know, we're educated and we have the privilege of being able to fight the insurance. Like, we wrote letters and sent pictures and advocated for ourselves, and we were able to get some things covered, but not our entire home. And unfortunately, our landlord also lost his home in the fire, and he was confused and refused to remediate the home. So all the walls were covered in soot, and our insulation, there wasn't running water. All the surfaces in the home needed to be cleaned, and he said he wasn't going to do it. So we had to we rented a 40-yard dumpster and a little tiny pod, and we spent like a week, we took a week off of work, and we wiped down and cleaned a few things that we could clean, and for the most part threw everything away and are living at my grandparents' house right now. And we are very fortunate because we have places to go, but like growing up in Altadena your whole life, I think my graduating class, we have like a Facebook page, and like there's 200 of them, 30 people in that group have lost their homes. So it's, lots of people don't have anywhere to go. So as renters or as people who are maybe living with their parents, maybe the parents, because it's per home, it's not per person. So maybe the parents are getting the FEMA support or the support for from the insurance, but everyone else that still lost everything might not be eligible for a lot of support. We didn't get any support from FEMA or Red Cross.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of, I guess it was a little surreal, because you think, oh, I live in the 21st century, right? We know how, there we go. We know how to fight fires. We've been doing that for hundreds of years. And then to watch an entire city. Is that better? Okay. And then to watch an entire city burn down in less than 24 hours was really just surreal, right? You go back to the area and it looks like a war zone. It looks like just a bomb went off in the middle of the city, and there's just burned husks and cars everywhere. And so, I mean, I'm not from Pasadena originally. I'm not from Altadena originally. I'm not from Southern California originally. Actually, I grew up in Northern California. But, you know, living here with my wife and being close to her family and my family as well, I really like the community that was Altadena, right? There was big from community members, you know, helping with events like this, as well as the World Central Kitchen, and I've been really grateful for, and the support that's, you know, afforded people. And yeah, I hope that continues. I hope that, you know, is able to progress or make itself, because I think a lot of the people here might not feel like they can stay or might not want to stay, but I think that community feeling is really good for the area.
Thank you, Cameron and Tyann and Matt, for sharing your stories. And those of you who have questions afterwards, please save them for them. if you have them. But if we're going down the row, we should all cheer for Eric Dyson first. Yay! Did you come in first?
Pretty close.
All right. I'll introduce my friend Eric Dyson to you in a moment, but we're going to ask, good, we'll go to, all right, we're going to do the Wilsons. So I'm glad that you are here, friends. They are a team ministry together. As I've watched their services online in the last few weeks, they do their ministry as like I said, a Methodist power couple. But they've also been housed at Scott United Methodist Church for a bit because they don't have their church home, and nor do they have their own home, family home. And so they're going through so much, and so I know that you were so busy and trying to figure things out, so thank you for being here as well. With a question for the Wilsons, and you can deviate or go whichever way you want for this, but how has your church community been a source of support, and what challenges still remain for you?
How has our church been a source of support? Good? Can you hear me now? For a lot of people, the concept of being a Christian is literally a concept. Or the concept of having a God that takes care of you is really a concept. And unfortunately, as we get busy in our lives, sometimes, if we're honest, we don't really see those connections every day. But when there's a tragedy, God shows up in some amazing ways. And to watch a community of Altadena United Methodist Church not only lose their homes, but to lose their church, but not lose their faith, and not lose their joy, and not lose their hope is a supernatural event. And to watch not only the local church of the Altadena United Methodist Church support one another, but to watch the entire conference, to watch churches in Thailand, churches around the world say that we are here, not just in sentiment, but we're physically here with you in prayer and donations and love. That's when you can see the face of God in a way that transcends the rat race. And so this is why we can say this peace that surpasses all understanding when you know that God is there. So we've been able to literally see the body of Christ come together, not just whether it's someone just grabbing you and watching people just cry. Because we have so many facades up. But when you've lost everything and all you have, and there's a quote from Mother Teresa, when all you have is Jesus, you realize Jesus is all you need. And sometimes everything has to get washed away before you realize what's really important. Life, faith, everything else will come back. But life and faith puts things in perspective. So through this tragedy, we love each other more. We love the community more. We are real more. And I've said this before. We begin to transcend these made-up barriers because they really don't matter. So that's the way we've seen that real love come together. Now, I'm speaking on that just as, was there another question?
Well, I can ask.
I'm going to pass the mic to the power couple.
Better half of the power couple. No, I'm kidding. Heather, your experience from Justice Ministries and disaster response, and you're also a lawyer, so what legal and systemic barriers have you seen in equitable aid and distribution? Because we've seen it, or we've not seen it on the news, the way things are distributed between Altadena and the Palisades. I mean, this is one of the reasons you're all here today.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you everybody for being here, for listening, and I thank and appreciate all of my fellow brothers and sisters here from Altadena and in Christ. Thanks for sharing your story. This has indeed been something that was not on any of our to-do lists, and indeed we have become closer in our own faith journeys and with one another. One of the things that was very powerful for me was when I went to Altadena after the fires, we had to be evacuated. We went to my sister-in-law's house in Riverside. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Everything was on fire. We went to hotel after hotel after hotel. Everything was booked. We would walk in and they'd say, "We're booked. We're booked. We're booked." Not hello, but we're booked. Ooh, so we did that until we got to Riverside. So from Altadena to Riverside, we said, well, we got to go to his sister's house. She welcomed us with arms, and we were exhausted. My mother-in-law and my daughter, our daughter, didn't get a chance to see what we saw. They wanted to see the house. They wanted to see the neighborhood. Sometimes just seeing it, as you know, gives you some sense of closure. But we were blocked off by the National Guard by that time. We were told you cannot go in or out. If you're already in, that's fine, but if you leave, you can't go back. A man came with his elderly mother, and he said, "I really need to get my mother's medication from the house." They said, "No, we're not going to let you back in there." He said, "I have to get the medication. She needs it yesterday, and the pharmacy, there's a whole line. We can't get the medication until tomorrow. I really need to get up there and get her medication." And they said, "We're so sorry. We can't let you in." Another woman said, "I need to go and check on my mother. I live there." And they said, "No, we cannot let you in." And she said, "You'll let the press in, right?" "Yeah, we can let media in. But you can't let us in, right?" "No, I'm so sorry." And then she went on and say, "You guys have made this burn. You did nothing to save our city because you don't care. We didn't have any water, and I pay my water bill every single month, but there was no water to save our houses. Y'all are talking and saving Palisades. We hear all about Pacific Palisades. You haven't talked once about Altadena or the Eaton Canyon fire." She was angry. She was also right. And I saw that disparity. We're not stupid. When you're a person of color in the United States, sadly, you know that the treatment you're getting may be very different than the treatment who doesn't look like you is getting. So we're not stupid. And I appreciate that woman. She was emotional, she was angry. I couldn't look down on her because she was saying what all of us were thinking. And I think when you talk about justice, I think we have to be careful not to pander. Like a politician, we care too much about making sure people like us and that we don't offend anybody, and then nothing happens because we're not authentic. So I appreciate the politicians, but I also know that politicians, and we also as a church have to be careful that we don't just become a photo op. One of the things that I also saw is that people didn't really care about my brothers and sisters up here. They cared about their photo op with people who were victims of the fire. So I realized being on the other end of tragedy and national and natural disaster is that quite honestly, I ask and I beg each and every one of us, me included, that you make sure when you're serving your brothers and sisters in Christ, that it is indeed about what they need, not what you want, not what you think they need. Also, as communities of color, it is not uncommon for people outside the community, often Caucasian, who think they need to show us how to manage our neighborhood, how to manage our resources. It is implicit, and that's why I can show love. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So when we serve one another, we have to do it in love and not anger. People don't mean to hurt us. They don't mean to be racist. But oftentimes it is built in to the society how we give. Another thing I will say is we are so appreciative of the prayers and the support and the financial blessings. And all of us, our communities need it. But also understand that this is not about making you or your church feel good. Please hear that. And I'm speaking to myself because I've been on the other end. I was in UMVIM and UMCOR and the General Bullard Global Ministries, and I traveled all around the world and my city here. And it's easy to have fundraisers and events for the poor people that are the victims and say, thank God it's not me. But these are people. These are human beings. And I'll also say it's interesting because I guarantee you most of us up here have not been on this side of tragedy before. So it's also been humbling. We're used to being the donors, not the donees. So we are all walking in this together. And my biggest ask is that we remember, what is this really about? Listening to the actual victims or giving what I think they need? When I would travel to other places, people would tell me, you know, we just received a bunch of clothes for winter weather. We appreciate it, but this is a hot and humid climate. And it's difficult being a victim of a tragedy because I don't want to say, hey, really listen to what we're saying we need, not what you think you want to give us. You have some extra items in your house. You have some secondhand clothes. You want to clean out your closet. Let me give it to these victims. I don't want to say too much because I thank you for thinking of us. But I ask you to also listen to us. I don't need your clothes. Right. That was the biggest thing. People would send us bags and bags of clothes. They were all over on the street corners of Altadena. Take it. But people were like, I don't have a house to take it to. But everybody wanted to do something. And that's why I say I love my brothers and sisters in Christ. I love you. And I've been there too. I just want to do something to help. Something so I can sleep at night. Because it didn't happen to me and I feel guilty. But before you move, let's ask, what do they really need?
Thank you, Sister Heather and Brother Andre. All right, thanks. Thank you, Sister Heather and Brother Andre, for sharing. We are deeply indebted to you as well because you're here, and we thank you for being with us on Tuesday for the board. So our board will be visiting the Altadena site on Tuesday afternoon. So, you know, I was a resident of Altadena myself, and our house was only 5 doors down from being burned, and it split right down the middle, and it just missed. And so I think about myself in that way, Heather, and like feeling guilty and having survivor's guilt in many ways. And so that's one of the reasons why I invited Rachel Gibson to come and join us today. And just to speak to the mental health trauma, she worked with the NASA JPL folks that, you know, just needed trauma care support right after the fires. And so our question, and you can deviate from this too, Rachel, how can churches and faith communities play a role in trauma-informed care and long-term emotional recovery?
Well, thank you, and I really appreciate that we started with the stories of living through it. And I think that is the appropriate and best way to start. And just take away what you were saying, I think the answer is in the listening. So much of what I heard and witnessed in the weeks after, as I was working with the Red Cross and working with JPL, and it moves, the needs shift and change as time goes on, as you would expect. But the trauma is compounding. The losses are compounding. And what is kind of immediately necessary in that the first days, hours after, begins to change and morph, but the attention of the nation moves away. And that becomes yet another loss, yet another point of trauma and mistrust and inequity in how this is responded to. You know, we're talking about people who have been historically marginalized, and that is amplified by disaster. The differences in resources and in allocation and support, that is only amplified following a disaster when resources are now being fought over by so many in Los Angeles. And that is compounded yet again by, as you've heard from everyone up here, the loss of community that accompanied this tragedy. And I really can't say enough about the mental health impact of that I think we can all sort of imagine the loss of our home. I don't think we can really know what it is like, but we can sort of grasp that level of loss or fear. And that's not only what we're talking about here. We're also talking about beloved communities, and that the resources that can provide mental health support, that can provide banding together to get the resources that you need to argue with insurance companies when you might not have the bandwidth to do so. Those communities were scattered in the wake of this fire. And that's been one of the biggest themes that I've heard is not even my house is gone, but my neighbors are gone. I can't open my door and see the house that I've looked at across the street for my entire life. I can't go to the grocery store and the person who checks me out asks about my kids. Like, my community is gone. And to answer the question, I think that is the space in which the church can step into. There is an absence of community, of predictability, of your people. And that, for me, the church has always been the provider of those things, has always been the place where I can find my familiar people. And, sometimes the people that they get on your nerve, that's part of community too. That's part of community too. And I think the gatherings we can have, the ways that we can show up and listen, be trauma-informed. And what I mean when I say trauma-informed is not that you have to know how to address trauma, but for us to know that there is trauma and trust that people will know what they need to start to feel better. If they need to talk to you about what happened and repeat themselves over and over and just sort of go through it, and they've said it to you, this is the 10th time, you trust that they need that, and you listen and you let them tell you the 11th time. And if they don't want to talk to you about it and you're kind of worried that they're not speaking about it, you trust that this just isn't the time, that they can't go there right now and they want to talk about something else. So when I say trauma-informed, I don't mean, lots of education, lots of training. I mean sensitive and aware that there's trauma, and yet community, we know how to deal with trauma. We do it. And if we can keep listening and not putting forward what we think people need, not demanding people talk about it, not telling people what they need to do to rebuild, what they need to do first, second, third, if we can be present and listen, that has healing powers that do become supernatural and that do become a place where the church can provide healing that is uniquely effective and full of grace and hope.
Can I speak about that just from a pastor's perspective? Because we are all saying the same thing, that it's there is trauma. And when a person, a lot of individuals, it's like we've all maybe lost people that we love. Now imagine everyone has lost someone that they love. And now you have a lot of people saying, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And so your brain doesn't work. We're literally just now coming out of the trauma where we can think. And I'm still struggling. I wouldn't say I can really possibly think right now. But it's so much trauma. And so what happens, the best thing is when you give financial resources to the church, they can go into the homes of those who they know and they've lived with and they minister to and say, here you go. But when you say, fill out 18 forms, come to us, come see us, and then possibly we'll give you half of a check of $1,000. And I just lost $1 million. What? Yeah. So, and I have individuals who have not gotten out of bed. I mean, process that. And you have people say, I'm going to send you this stuff. But if you send finances, when they finally get up, let's go shopping. Because you don't have a spatula. You don't have a frying pan. That's something that you can't really process. But the church can do that. I've had individuals just say, here's 100,000, bye-bye. And to be honest, I want my people. You know what I'm talking about when I say my people? It's you. To say, here you go. But a lot of times we are Methodists. And Methodists want you to follow the procedures. And when you are traumatized, you say, I'd rather go back and get in bed. And so when you have the church, we'll come to you. And we'll be there and walk with you. And so I think that's something that I think we don't really understand. And we're all talking about trauma. People need to go and get them and pick them up. So that's what we do. Yes.
It's just quick. I'm also a social worker, and so I'm in the helping field. I'm a therapist and I'm a professor, and I'm used to be the helper. It's actually humiliating to be the person that needs help.
Yes.
So they got the FEMA Center, they got the World Central Kitchen, and you walk up there and you're like, is it okay if I have this dinner? Like, you're not used to being the one that has to ask for dinner. And then you have cameras in your faces. And then you have people that are like, you only get one hot sauce, you know? It's embarrassing to be in that position. So a lot of people would rather not do it. And also, when you talk about FEMA, when you talk about Red Cross, on Washington, Woodbury, there's a resource center. But everywhere you go, it almost feels like you have to justify that you need help. You have to write down your income, and well, maybe I made this much last year, but I haven't worked in a month, you know? You have to write down your income. You have to go from place to place to place to place to place. There's also, and the last thing that I want to say is that when we talk about trauma-informed care, thinking about all the children that also lost everything and now are living with stressed out parents. My daughter, her daycare burned, and so she's been at that daycare since she was 9 months, and so not being able to see like her daycare, the owner, she called auntie, and that she's like, when am I gonna see her again, you know? So all of those things are things to keep into consideration, like when you're giving help, like making sure that you're not doing it in a way that people feel like they have to justify that they need help, because everybody in Altadena needs help. And I also would suggest to just drive around, because all the streets are open. You can see 10 blocks up just through. And it gives you a perspective because the cameras can't catch that. I think it gives you a little humility to be able to see that. So that's what I just had.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that up, especially with the kids. There was a lot of foster homes in Altadena. There's several group homes, and there's a lot of homes there that opened up their doors to foster children who are my clients. So those were gone. So one of the first things we had to make sure is that our clients were also moved. So they've already been removed from their families. They've been placed with foster homes. Now they lost that foster home. They were spread out and put in hotels. So it's been very, very hard for the kids. I also want to lift up the children at our church too. We have a vibrant children's ministry, but everything is different now. We're in a different church that wasn't really set up at that time for children's ministry. They missed their classrooms. All of our Christmas pageant stuff is gone. So these are the things, our Easter stuff is gone. These are the things, everything's gone. So those are things that, again, that loss. They are replaceable, we understand that. But again, it's that sentiment. It's the building up. It's the stories, right, that we all have of those physical, tangible things that are gone. I also want to lift up the undocumented immigrants. I know of a family whose house was burned down. They have not applied for anything, and they will not. Being an attorney, they came to me. They're a friend of my daughter's at school, and they said, we lost our house, but do you think we should fill out the FEMA application, Heather? I'm undocumented. I said, if I were you, probably not. As a federal agency, these are federal moves. That would be my advice to you. But ultimately, you have to make the choice for you and your family. And we'll do what we can to help you. And this is, again, where the church comes in.
No, the reality isn't, these funds that our larger churches provided, we started off saying, hey, the individuals have lost their homes in our church, but it's quickly been those down the street and those who are undocumented. So that money is not just for those individuals anymore. It has to be a fountain out to anyone who's in need. And so the church has become a fountain to all who are in need, and there's so many. So just thank you for that.
I'd like to add something also. One thing that I think the church or other groups could help with is helping people, like you said, that are still in bed, to help them with their paperwork.
Yes.
To take them by the hand and say, have you filed your paperwork? No, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to do this. If it wasn't for my daughter, I wouldn't have known how to file a few things. I'm not savvy like that. I'm old. So she took my hand and guided me through some things, and it helped me a lot. To get representatives to grab someone by the hand and say, have you filed any paperwork? No, I don't know what to do. Let's go down to the resource center. Go table to table to table to table. Guess what? You're all done. They're going to start calling you, notifying you, and getting things done. Yes.
I think that is absolutely something that the church can do. And to add the mental health explanation of this, during and after a trauma, your brain is structurally changed. So this kind of executive functioning of having to fill out a form, what you need to do that, the parts of your brain that are used to complete that form have shrunken. And it can be viewed on brain scans. Your prefrontal cortex has shrunk. Your hippocampus, where you have memories and short and long-term attachments, your emotions attached to memories, it has shrunk. But your center, your alarm center, that's highly active. And that continues to cycle you through fight or flight. And these lead to actual structural changes in your brain that makes overwhelm inevitable. It makes accessing information that you've known your entire life, like your kid's name. There was one person I spoke to, and the main way that I was sort of supportive in this trauma is that she was having a panic attack because when she was asked for her child's name for a form, she couldn't remember it and thought she was going crazy. And she was so scared that she was losing her mind, and she thought she was telling me, I can't, I'm a single parent, I'm losing, and I was able to just reassure her, like, your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. If you're fighting for your life, you don't need to know your name. It's not giving that area any blood. It will come back. It will come back. You're not going crazy. This is by design. But asking someone in that moment to fill out 57 pages of paperwork and justify and even name what they need, to even ask someone what they need in that moment, is not in alignment with how we can be most supportive, because it requires a level of brain functioning that is quite physically not accessible at that time.
Thank you. Thanks, panelists, for sharing. I want to just invite you to take a deep breath as we shift just a little bit to our next panelist. Just breathe in. It's heavy. You all have carried so much with you these last few months, and so I think we all are grateful that you are taking these moments to be with us tonight, so thank you. Before our question and answer, I want to introduce our last panelist, but not least, he didn't come in last in the marathon. But a member of First United Methodist Church, Pasadena. This is my friend Eric Dyson, and his family resides in the Pasadena area. Not only does Eric, do you still teach Sunday school? He still teaches Sunday school, elementary kids. My husband loves that you do that. And he still does AV Tech. But his children were also in my youth group, and now they're grown adults. And his family lived in the fire zone and had to evacuate to First United Methodist Church, Pasadena. And they made their way down Eaton Canyon, and so as the fire made its way down. And when he's not teaching Sunday school or running the LA Marathon, Eric is an award-winning cinematographer, screenwriter, and filmmaker whose life experiences are what touch his work as a storyteller. I invited Eric here to show and share us how his experience with the fires has shaped the landscape of his next project. And so the question that we have for you today, Mr. Dyson, is, as a storyteller, what do you think is missing from the public narrative about wildfires and disaster recovery?
From the public narrative? First of all, thank you for having me. And there's a lot that's missing, and I think the public perception of, and I'm sure we've all seen this throughout Altadena, influencers, news cameras, right? Everybody has a camera and everybody feels like it's their place to capture a slice of what has happened there. So I was very hesitant to even start this project and didn't really know how to start it. And I had just previously done a 150th anniversary documentary project for our church. And that was the end of my documentary work. And then the fire happened. And I got a handful of text messages and emails. Are you going to do anything about it? And it puts you in this position like, why should I be the person to do it, right? And then you ask yourself, well, why not? So there's a lot that goes into it. And forgive me if I'm straying from your question, but it's important to note that when you pull your camera out and when you ask people questions and how you go about documenting what happened, what's happening now, and what's happening in the future, you have to be really sensitive and you have to be super respectful. And the best connections that I've been able to make have been, Altadena is such a tight-knit community. It's almost always, I'll talk to someone on the phone and they'll refer me, oh, well, you should talk to so-and-so and so-and-so. So it kind of branches out. So what I think is missing from the public perception or the public narrative is taking it slow, like waiting, not being so quick to just put your camera in someone's face, because you talk about fight or flight, you're going to come into a confrontation pretty quick with both of those. And you know, no one wants to feel like, if you're trying to document something, like these are not people who are necessarily actors who would be comfortable in front of the camera. And I've experienced that where people are so nervous about it that they just constantly keep looking in the camera. So it's hard to make it a conversation and not a documentation. But the stories that we've been collecting are fantastic, and each one of these narratives, and I'm probably up to 15 interviews by now. Where do you want to do it? What do you want to start with? What do you want to tell me about what happened? And I'm also their neighbor, right? And I also got evacuated. And so we have that commonality there, that when they're talking about grabbing their children and what they took because they thought they were coming back the next day, and they came back to just, you know, ashes, right? And the things that we took. When we evacuated, it was a farce because me and my wife, we have a child who lives at home. We have a son who, he and his girlfriend were in town from Arizona looking for an apartment. So that's 5 adults. They brought their dog, they brought their cat. We have our dog. We have our other daughter's dog during the week because she works full time. We have my mother's dog. We have a daughter's cat who lives at home. And we have a turtle. So 5 adults and 7 pets. So when I tell that part of the story to people I'm interviewing who are like, you know, the fire singed the hair on the back of my neck, you know, it's a little bit like, I don't know, I mean, the trauma of that and the way it affected our family. And, you know, yes, it's funny when you have to evacuate with all these pets and these people. And we went down to the church because we didn't know where else to go. But you know, that's like the humanality of it. And the things that have been touching me so much are things like, we evacuated and we took our son's ashes, but we forgot our uncle's ashes. Or we, you know, we interviewed the director of the Pasadena Chorale, who also lost his home, and the Pasadena Chorale lost their rehearsal space, and 4 or 5 members lost homes, and he lost a grand piano and sheet music and things that he's created. And as a creator myself, I took hard drives and passports, but I didn't take my father's instruments that when he passed away I got. So the things you leave behind, and one of the things I think is so important about why we have to tell these stories and find the least suspecting person to tell their story, because when all the people who are giving help at all the corners throughout, you know, Pasadena and Altadena are gone, which is basically now, you know, it's easy to feel like a marginalized community is even more forgotten. And when you're a senior citizen and you're 70 years old or 80 or 90 and you want to rebuild and you don't know if you'll even live long enough, I feel like telling your story in the right circumstances for not just our community, but for the rest of the world when this project is done, so that we can document what happened when all the cameras left, when most of the aid is gone. What happened when you thought you wanted to rebuild, you got $400,000 from your insurance, and then by the time you're ready to break ground, you've spent $100,000 of it, and that wasn't even enough to build with. So how these stories develop and how they end up coming full circle, and I hope everybody we interview, the finale is, I'm back at my house, I'll see you later, and they close the door. But we all know that that's not going to happen. So being honest to hearing their stories and portraying their stories, and yeah, getting that across to the people who don't even know where Altadena is very important.
I just want to piggyback Eric's very briefly. One of the things that I have not heard lifted up too much is how unique Altadena is. It's not an African American community. And we keep saying it. It's not. It's a multicultural community. And it's a real multicultural community where your neighbors are white, black, Asian, and everything, and you know people as people because it's one of the few places that were not redlined. And the thing, it's never gonna be that way again because a lot of African Americans cannot rebuild there. So we're losing not just homes or an African American, you're losing a real melting pot. Altadena people are like pioneers. They have a pioneer spirit. They are viciously protective of each other, regardless of race. And that's a very unique community. So I don't want to miss that part of the story.
And I'll just close by, there's a pastor in La Cañada who is well aware of La Cañada's sort of arm's distance to like, you know, we're going to help those people, but be clear that they live down there and we live up here. So he really starts from that place and holds his church accountable, his community members accountable. And one of the things we talked about was not only how quickly they went into what can we do to help, cash, gift cards, these kind of things, but also wondering like, what is Altadena 2.0 going to look like? And this multicultural sort of phenomenon that has happened up there. And what if everything everyone is doing now better prepares Los Angeles County for, you know, looking at all of Los Angeles like Altadena, right? Like, I don't know anybody who has helped so much that they can't put food on their table or pay their own rent. So, you know, what if we didn't stop at Altadena, right? Like, what if we didn't have 90,000 people living on the streets because LA County now, you know, looks out for itself? Anyway, that's sort of the fantasy and the big picture. And, you know, I think in order to make change, you almost always have to ask, what if?
Thank you, panelists, for sharing today. And we just wanted to open up a time and a space for any of you who would like to ask any questions. And if you do so, just let us know who you'd like to address it, unless you say anyone in the panel. But this is just an open space for us to share and ask any more further questions. But we're so grateful for this time together. So thank you. Would anybody like to start us off? So you be the microphone passer, Rachel, and I'll pass it to Joe.
Hi, my name's Joey Lopez. I'm one of the board members at the General Board. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a lay member from the Pacific Northwest Annual Conference in Seattle. My ministry context is I'm one of the executive directors of Seattle, the Church Council of Greater Seattle. And we work on two things, immigration and land use. And I think for me as a person of color, and for the way in which a lot of our work has shaped up at the Church Council, it is about the resiliency of communities of color to push back against displacement and to carve out their space in a very white city that has a cost of living that's pushing everyone out as quickly as possible. And I'm curious how you all are imagining sort of what is taking care of people look like, but also what is the policy and the structures that you may be creating to sort of push back against displacement, to keep Altadena an 80% Black home ownership place, or to reinforce some of this multicultural pieces that you were speaking to. And I really think all of you could speak to this, but I am looking, I think, to the two of you just because you were sort of, I could hear it imagining in what you were sharing. So that's what I'm curious about.
Hello. I had the privilege of talking to Governor Newsom and having quite a few conversations with the executives there, and that was their major fight. Because as you know, predatory developers were coming in big time and offering individuals, especially seniors, I mean, when you're 70 and your house burns down, it's much easier to take a check and move in with your son than to try to rebuild when you look at the time and the effort and then trauma. So we were losing a lot of people. We have lost a lot of people already who have decided to take those checks and go. So there were some laws put forth to stop those, to give them fair compensation for their properties, but it's still going on. It's just, we keep saying trauma. When you're in trauma, you just want to get out. You really want the nightmare to stop. Because for everybody else, they've moved on to something else, planes. But you just want it to stop. And so I really don't know the right answer. I know people are trying to stop it, but maybe you can speak up. It's happening. It's just happening right now.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. And I think one of the things that Governor Newsom shared with us is he said, please, please, I can't force you not to sell property, but please make sure it's a fair price. And so I think one of the things we can encourage one another is find out what is the fair price of your home. Make sure you know it. So when people come to you with offers, especially when you're tired and your brain's not working right, which it isn't, you're exhausted. We're just exhausted. I'm exhausted, y'all, okay? It's exhausting. And so my heart really goes out to, for example, seniors who are also facing so many other things coming at them. But is knowing what your land is worth. We've got to know what our worth is. And in communities of color, typically, we struggle with this, right? We struggle with our own sense of self-esteem and what our worth is. And then there's a snowball effect that goes into the tangible things about the estates and the possessions that we own. So if we're really going to do ministry with that, we've got to learn to receive the love of God, to receive his love and know our worth as his creation. Then we have to share that with one another. And so regardless of your human suit, you are loved. Regardless if the world tells you that you are less than, you're not as smart as, you're not as worthy of, both implicitly and explicitly, it is there, it is in the society, it is in the church. We need to own that. It is in the church. It is in church policy. It is written in, it is implicit. It is there. We could do another workshop on that if you'd like. I'd be happy to be part of that panel and hear more. But that's one of the things we can do, is pay attention to that. Then you've got to know your numbers. What was your estate worth? What was your property worth? And we as the church can help one another with that. And you don't need to fight the insurance companies, the legal battles, the landlords. You don't need to fight that alone. There's pro bono organizations that we can connect people to so they don't feel alone, because it really is a David and Goliath kind of thing. And it's overwhelming, especially when you're exhausted. Of course.
And as a pastor, I have individuals who are looking at me saying, I'm making the decision to move. And I have individuals from the conference saying, what can we do? What I would like to see more, Pastor, give us those names and we're going to come by them, come and see them, and we were going to help them through this process. We have individuals who are going to show them the options instead of just selling and leaving. So I think people who have the expertise to actually connect to those who are in need. I think that's where we're failing. Because there's a lot of people saying, look, we have a lot of resources, we're really smart. That's great. But how do the smart people that can navigate get to those who are in need? That's where I've seen the disconnect. And I just don't know if anybody has an idea on that.
I also just want to lift up, regardless of your politics, it did not go unnoticed to us that the President of the United States did come here, went to the Pacific Palisades, and did not come to Altadena. So regardless if you love him, hate him, that is your choice. I don't care. I'm just saying that it speaks volumes to a community when the president goes one place, but not another place, and they were both devastated by fires. So again, we want to bring voice to communities that are often left out of the national conversation. So I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Witness to your experiences. You didn't have to risk being vulnerable and sharing that with us. And I know it takes you back into a place that you are also trying to lead in terms of your own heart and souls in your lives. And so my question, both in response to your sharing and as a person now living in Florida, where there are catastrophes on multiple levels. So you start with politics and end with weather, the other way around, doesn't really matter. It's just a hot mess. I'm curious to know how you feel, so I'm not asking you what you plan to do, but how you feel when people share their own thoughts and advice, such as, well, you're not going to rebuild, are you? I mean, it's going to cost this, and maybe it's a sign that houses shouldn't be here, and this is your opportunity to live somewhere else, and, you know, just all the unsolicited advice well-intended people want to give, and they want you to know how you're contributing to the cost of insurance in your area and just all of that.
You know, like everybody said up here, Altadena is a very diverse community. I've been there my whole life. And, you know, there are a lot of people that, the community's changed over the years a couple of times. There's a lot of what I tell my family, there's new people up here. These people are new, these people are new. Of course, they've been there for 20 years, but to me, they're new. And sometimes the new people don't get the full concept and vision of what that town is. We call it, you know, the west side of town we call Dena. You know, it's different. It's not Altadena, it's not Pasadena, it's Dena. And there's a saying, Dena's strong. Sorry. It comes from us being missed. Like they said, you know, whatever your political affiliation is, we missed. It's almost like they don't care. They're the black community up in the hills, you know, and we have to be strong as far as, you know, you're saying people come on up to you and saying, oh, you should move, you should move. You know what? No. You know, some people are gonna move, some people have to move. Some people can't do anything else than take the money for their land and go somewhere else. But there's plenty of people who don't have to do that. And that's what Dena Strong is all about. We're gonna make a stand up there, and we're gonna bring it back to where it was. And that's how I feel, and that's how I tell my neighbors, and when I talk to my neighbors, I wanna be the phoenix coming up. And, you know, the people that are moving are the people that are moving. And people come up and say, hey, you should move. You know, why live back here? Because it's Altadena. Period.
I think that, yeah, it's just like this I remember when I went to college, I went to John Muir High School, which is in Altadena. And Jackie Robinson went to John Muir. And we were just all together. Like, we were, you know, and I went to college and at UC Riverside. And I was like, oh, wait, we're not together? Like, we're divided by, like, race and, like, there's the Asian group and the black group, and like we were all together. So I think that that's what's so important to capture about Altadena, is that we've kind of figured out how to love each other up there, and a lot of places around the world that hasn't been figured out. And so losing that is painful, or the idea of losing that is painful. So when people say, like, take the insurance money, or, there's a lot of fear mongering and things about, like, the toxicity and, all of that. It's kind of like, but you don't understand the community. And Altadena, it has it even more than Pasadena. So I think that's just one thing to capture. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's important to highlight.
We have time for one more question, and then you can have, there's more food, and then you can ask questions of our panelists, and then I'm gonna give it to Steve. It's because I'm passing a mic.
Hi, I'm Steve, and I'm related to 3 of the people up there on the panel. I think what I've heard tonight, aside from the individual stories, which I'm very familiar with, I moved out to Altadena when I was 14 years old. But I'd visited my grandmother each previous summer, so I was familiar with Altadena from the time I was 9 years old, 1958. That'll tell you how old I am. And I always found it, growing up in Altadena and then in Pasadena, to be that community which was separate from Pasadena because of the way it made me feel when I crossed certain streets. I grew up in New York City as a young boy, and you could tell then, as a young boy, you crossed the street, you were in a different neighborhood. It's as simple as that. You crossed 34th Street, you crossed Queensboro Boulevard, you crossed Roosevelt Boulevard, you crossed 34th Street, you're in a different neighborhood. And that's how Altadena felt. And what I hear tonight is a great sense of fear and loss, because Altadena has that community thing. And it's very rich. And I think in part because of the damn freeways that were built back in the early 70s, which cut off that section of the county with the 210 freeway and so they. I'm rambling. I want to say that I want that community feeling to be back, and in order to get that back, because it's not gone, is to continue. And for those who leave, sorry, farewell. But for those who come, welcome. Welcome. You are in a unique place, you are in a unique community, and we welcome you. And we want you to be a part of this community as best as you can understand it. Whether you bought 2 lots together and built a mansion, or you just rebuilt the house that you lost, there's something for you here. And I fear that loss. I've lived in Altadena and Pasadena most of my life. I fear that. But I know that there's hope, and I know that we can be Altadena strong and keep moving forward. Thank you for letting me speechify.
I'll just piggyback on what Steve said, which I grew up, I don't know, 7 or 8 miles from here. And I had never even heard of Altadena other than the dairy, right? And I had a neighbor, I was 7 or 8 years old, and she happened to be black, and she said, we're moving to Altadena. And it wouldn't be until I moved to Pasadena myself, and now I've been in Pasadena almost 30 years, so I'm sort of a longtime resident. But one of the things I noticed that biking through Altadena, or running through Altadena, or walking, like, when they say ain't like us, like, Altadena is not like anywhere. Neighborhoods with no sidewalks, empty lots that have been empty, since they put the freeway in. People on horseback that because it's unincorporated, you can do that, right? And like wildlife, and all that with a heavy black population, and growing up in the city where black folks moved because that's where they could live. Like, it was a fascinating, and to this, like before the fires, when I would go through there, I was always amazed at the richness, the love from neighbor to neighbor. You saw in that video, African-American man and his white neighbor across the street. And that conversation was organic, and they were both in tears by the time they were done talking. But it's that kind of community effort, and whether you move in and rebuild or you build your house exactly like it was, that's the responsibility of the residents who stay there to make sure that this is what we want and this is what we require of people who are moving into our community.
Words, panelists? Wow. It has been a fabulous time with all of you, but also hard. So we want to thank our panelists. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. The Board of Church and Society and our Justice and Compassion Ministries are with you, and we will work and find ways to systemically change what's happened. The board is going to continue to have these conversations during this week, but we want to thank you all for gathering here tonight and for your openness and your candor and your stories and your commitment to justice and rebuilding. And so our work does not end here, though. Listening is only just the beginning. And the real challenge and the real opportunity lies in what we do next. So how will we take what we learned tonight and turn it into action? Here's the question. How will we as people of faith, as neighbors, as advocates, commit to rebuilding with justice? So tonight, as you go back to your beds, I know many of you have had long days, whether it's at church or flying in or coming from other countries. I invite you to reflect on the following. What is one step you can take to support those still recovering? How can we hold decision makers accountable for equitable disaster relief? And where is our church being called to stand in the gap for communities in need? I wanted to share because this is part of what we do as a General Board of Church and Society. We invite those who are in the broader group to continue to support those with California wildfire relief. We have our CalPAC fund, and we are praying that it goes directly to our church communities as they need so. For our General Board of Church and Society, your giving will be at tomorrow's hunger dinner back at Faith United Methodist Church, and we'll share more about what a hunger dinner is if you are new to the General Board. And we also invite you to sign up to be on our General Board of Church and Society newsletter, to sign up to be a part of an Corps or VIM team to rebuild in these communities that need rebuilding. And so, friends, I'm going to invite the other pastor to pray. Yes, you to pray us out. But as you leave, may you not leave here with heavy hearts, but with a determined spirit.
Can we just stand up and hold hands and be in the same spirit? I'm not gonna. Let's go to our Lord and Savior. Lord God, we just come before you. And we acknowledge that you are good. And you are powerful. And we are your children. And God, you have endowed us with gifts that come from you, that will glorify you. We're asking that you release those gifts right now. That they come to the surface and you give us the courage to give them away. Because that's why you saved us. So we can show the world that you live. Show the world that there's more than racism, sexism, homophobia. But there's real love. And God, you've called this church, this denomination, to back up our sentiment, to really be your hands and your feet to a hurting community. So inspire us, direct us, and motivate us to be your people. In Jesus' wonderful name we pray. Amen? Amen.